everyone! So it is almost time for me to store my potted plants for winter, and something that's important to understand when you are overwintering plants, really anywhere, but especially in containers where we can control the overwinter environment a little bit more, are chilling requirements for the different perennials that you might be trying to overwinter in your garden. Now, I had a few misconceptions about what chilling requirements actually meant, and that led me to making some decisions in my garden that actually weren't correct. So I want to share with you what exactly chilling requirements are, and then how you can use that to determine how and where you're going to overwinter your potted plants. But first, to understand what chilling requirements are, we have to talk about dormancy. Now, since most plants aren't growing over winter, we say that they are actually dormant. Now, this dormancy period is what ensures that the plants aren't going to try to produce any fruit or flowers in the late fall going into winter, because obviously the fruit and flowers won't survive the freezing temperatures. So dormancy is incredibly important for these plants in order for you to have fruit and flowers in the next season. Now, getting a little bit more complicated, during dormancy there are actually two main stages of dormancy. There's endodormancy and ecodormancy. Endodormancy happens first, and then it's followed by ecodormancy. During endodormancy, it's something that's inside the plant that's making sure that it doesn't grow. And this means that if there are, let's say there are 60-degree days in December, the plant's still not going to try to fruit or flower because it's within endodormancy. And again, that's something inside of the plant that is keeping it from growing during that dormancy period. Ecodormancy then occurs when the plant is ready to grow, so there's no longer something inside of the plant inhibiting growth, but it's too cold outside. So it's something with the environment outside of the plant that's preventing it from growing. So endodormancy inside happens first, followed by ecodormancy, which is then based on the outside conditions. Now, how a plant in endodormancy knows not to grow is that it's going to be tracking what are called chilling hours to know when winter is over. So the endodormancy period isn't going to end until a certain number of chilling hours have been reached. So if any warm weather, no matter the temperature, occurs before the minimum required chilling hours, the plant is not going to grow. And these required numbers can vary. There's no set number, it's 1,000 chilling hours for every single plant. It'll vary based on the plant, and it can also vary based on varieties of plants. For example, I think apples are typically one of the fruit trees, a type of fruit tree that needs the most number of chilling hours, but there are some varieties that can actually grow in California, where it's obviously a lot warmer than it is here, because those varieties need fewer chilling hours. So if you're ever wondering how many chilling hours your plant needs, look up the name and the variety and look for chilling hours, and hopefully something should come up on Google. And the range for chilling hours can be pretty large. Some plants need fewer than 500, some need 1,500 to 2,000 plus chilling hours, so it really is going to depend on the types of plants that you are growing in your garden. Now, here is the misconception I had. Chilling hours is not the amount of time spent below freezing, so 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. In fact, hours below freezing don't count towards chilling hours. It is hours that are just above freezing that go towards chilling hours. So it doesn't matter if it's below freezing, has no impact on the number of chilling hours that your plant is accumulating. That does help with cold hardiness, but nothing at all to do with chilling requirements, which I had completely backwards, because I thought a lot of my plants needed to be in areas that were consistently below 32 degrees. And that's not true. And in fact, that can actually cause more damage because my plants have a lot less protection at their root ball from the cold weather, since they are growing in containers. So then after the plant has recorded the number of chilling hours that are needed, that's when the endodormancy ends and the buds can start to form if the environment is warm enough. But again, because it's still so cold, that's when it enters into ecodormancy. So the only reason that the buds aren't forming is because the weather is too cold. So, a plant might end endodormancy in, let's say, December, and there's still a couple months before it gets warm enough, especially here in Chicago, for the ecodormancy period to end, because we can get cold weather for quite a long time into the new year here. This is important because, and I'm sure you might know this, once the plant is in ecodormancy and the weather starts to warm up, the plant no longer has the ability to revert back and be able to handle the cold weather. Dormancy, it just can't readjust. So that's why, which I experienced this year with one of my cherry trees and maybe one of my hydrangeas, where the buds will start to form because the weather is getting warm enough, and then we get a cold snap and the buds, the tender buds, cannot handle it and they die. So if you've ever had that happen where buds start to swell and then they die, it's because the plant was coming out of dormancy and Mother Nature just brought too cold of the weather into the area and unfortunately damaged or killed the buds on the plant. So because of that, I might be tempted to protect my plants longer than I have in the past. This past winter, going into spring, I was really excited as soon as I started to see buds swell. So I removed things from either the garage or my plastic greenhouse and put them out in the full sun on the deck, and then the cold weather came back. So I'm going to protect my plants for longer this year in more sheltered locations so that that potentially doesn't happen to them, because I really hate to lose any of my plants because, again, I don't have a ton up here. So I don't want any of the plants that I have to get destroyed by any late season cold snaps. So now that we've talked about chilling requirements and chilling hours, what exactly is the temperature range for chilling hours? And this is something that I found a few different results for, or ranges from, based on the articles I was reading. Now, I always tend to favor articles that are from colleges, extensions, rather than blogs, but I will read both just to see kind of how much overlap there is. And the difference here was that there were just like wider ranges and smaller ranges, but from that they all did have at least some temperature chilling hour recommendations that did overlap. So I'm going to read through some of the different ranges that were mentioned and then kind of tell you what I'm shooting for. All right, so first, just in general, that not all of the hours above freezing are equal. So this first article said temperatures between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, or 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, are the most effective chilling hours. So this one says between 40 and 50. Temperatures that are just above freezing, so like 33, 34, 35, and above 50 degrees Fahrenheit are less effective, and temperatures above 60 often have a negative effect on chilling. So this article is basically saying that from above freezing to like 59, those are all chilling hour temperatures, but the 40 to 50 degree range is going to be the most effective. So that was the first one. The second article just blatantly said 45 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The next one said the chill hour is the amount of chilling received by a plant at 45 degrees. So that one was just 45 degrees. Next one said chill hours refer to the total number of hours between 32 and 45. So that one set the maximum at 45 versus that kind of being the average or the target. And then a paper that was referenced almost in everything that I read was, so it says in their 1992 paper, Chilling Accumulation, Its Importance and Estimation, David H. Byrne and Terry Bacon detailed 3 models which worked by counting the number of hours of temperatures less than 45 degrees or between 32 and 45 degrees, or 0 and 7 degrees Celsius. Then they had a Utah model where the temperatures ranged from 34 to 60. So the summary thing from that said most people agree that temperatures below freezing or over 60 degrees have a negative effect on chilling accumulation or don't affect it. So less than 32, above 60, definitely don't contribute to the number of chilling hours. And then kind of from what I gathered from reading everything, I, myself, am going to target somewhere between 40 to 45. And I say I'm going to target because we do have a heated garage. We never heat it the same as our house at all. But I think we normally set ours around 40 degrees. And that's actually perfect for overwintering most of my plants that have chill requirements. And I always thought that was too warm. Again, because I assumed chilling hours were temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But it actually is perfect. So I'm going to store a lot of my plants, and I'll tell you which plants I have that need chilling hours. I'm going to store a lot of my plants in the garage over winter at that kind of 40 degree target, and that will be absolutely perfect for them. And this is also interesting because I always read things that say, like, for overwintering shrubs, don't store in a heated garage or a heated shed. But it really doesn't matter if it's heated or not, it's what temperature it's getting to. So if it's above 60, don't store it there. But if it's below that, then you can store it there. So that was something that was just completely new for me. in trying to understand chilling requirements more. So I've been doing like the complete opposite of what we actually have available to us in terms of the environment I can create to overwinter my plants. So the chilling requirement, again, is going to be the total number of hours that a plant needs to experience between those temperatures, but it doesn't have to be consecutive. So if there are a few days in a row where it gets really warm or really cold, that's fine. It just needs to accumulate enough of those hours during the late fall to early spring period for it to then leave dormancy. Now, something I thought was interesting is that, again, I would probably assume that plants that are native to more northern regions would need more chilling hours, but that's not correct. So plants that are more native to either southern regions or northern regions need fewer chilling hours. In the south, it's because it doesn't stay, oh, there's a little fly, it's because it doesn't stay cold long enough in those temperature ranges long enough. And in the north, it doesn't stay in that 32 to 60 degree range enough because it's too cold. So it stays colder than it needs to be. So really, I think where I am in Chicago, like Michigan area, is right in a good spot of plants that probably need a good amount of chilling requirements because it's not like super, super cold, but also not super, super hot. So I just thought that was interesting that the more north you go doesn't mean that the plants that are native to that area need more chilling requirements. So just some other things that I thought were interesting to note is, again, chilling requirements are not the same thing as winter hardiness. So winter hardiness is the lowest temperature your plant can handle, whereas the chill hours are, again, between that like above freezing to somewhere below 60 degree range. Also, and this is a question I've been asked a lot, when it comes to plants going dormant, do you need to store them in a place with light? No, because they're dormant. They don't know if there's light shining on them or not, but as soon as you do start to see those buds form, like for example, if I am, let's say, storing a hydrangea in our garage, the garage is going to naturally warm up as the exterior, the weather gets warmer. So once I start to see a little bit of that growth, and probably honestly even before that, because growth is happening inside the plant before you start to see the buds swell, but when I know the temperatures are getting warmer, hello pigeon, then I get them into light. So once you start to see the buds swelling, or if you're storing bulbs, you start to see the bulbs poking through the soil, make sure at that point that you are getting them into sunshine. But again, remembering to store them in case you see a cold snap coming up. I need to be more careful about that next spring. And also then if you're growing in the ground, obviously a lot of this is going to happen naturally because your plants are exposed to Mother Nature, but you still want to be on the lookout, especially in the late winter, early spring, if things do start to heat up too soon and you know the temperatures are going to drop, or there's an expected drop, let's say in like April, we get snow sometimes, to cover your plants and protect them a little bit if that does happen. So it's just interesting. It seems like, if I was growing in the ground, Mother Nature would be doing a lot of this, but I'd have less control, whereas with containers, I do have a lot of control. I just need to be able to carry my plants downstairs into the garage. Another thing to note is that a lot of the plants that have bulbous roots, or bulbs themselves, like tulips, daffodils, a lot of them have enough space in there to store nutrients, store water, so you might not have to water those much, if at all, compared to, like, let's say my hydrangeas, which don't have bulbous roots. So these I will probably need to water more often over the winter, because you still do need to water over the winter, from most things, not all things. For example, the caladium bulbs, you're not supposed to water at all. Dahlia tubers that I overwinter, I don't water that much, not as often as my plants that don't have the bulbous roots. So just keep that in mind, that not everything you're overwintering needs to be watered at the same frequency. Now, let's talk about the plants that I am going to be overwintering that do have chill requirements. So first off, our fruit trees. I now have 4 in my garden. I have 2 columnar apple trees. I have 1 dwarf cherry tree that I need to get a second one of if I'm going to grow it next year. I'm trying to decide if I have enough room. If I do, I'll get a second one. If not, I'm going to give this away to a friend. And then I also have a beach plum tree. Now, the 2 apples and the cherry are small enough that I can carry downstairs. The beach plum is not. So that one is just going to have to sit out here. It's also too tall to go into my plastic greenhouse. It's going to have to stay out here and see how it does. So I will provide it with some insulation around the pot. If you are going to leave something completely outside and uncovered, it's best if it's in a larger container, because again, that's going to be more protection for the root ball. So I just move things close to a wall. I'll put some insulation around them from other containers, and I'll cross my fingers and hope that they survive. Things that I leave outside completely uncovered that have survived so far are my raspberry bushes. My blueberry bushes did survive the winter. They died from blight later on, so I don't have them anymore. But when I did, I could leave them outside all winter, and they came back fine in the spring. And then my rhubarb plant. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've left out completely and that's consistently come back. I think those are the main plants. Next up are my hydrangeas, which are sitting here next to me. This is the tiny quickfire, and I got these at the Grand Garden Show in 2022? Yeah, 2022. They were so small last year that I didn't really know what they looked like in the fall, but look how pretty this is. Like the deep pink of the flowers, the deep kind of purplish color of the leaves, it goes really nicely together. So I definitely don't want these to die because they are pretty. So my hydrangeas are going to go, well, most of my hydrangeas are going to go in the garage for that kind of 40-degree temperature setting. I say most because there's one that's in a pot that's too heavy for me to carry downstairs, so that's going to go in my plastic greenhouse. I know my plastic greenhouse stays warmer than the outside, but I never had a thermometer out here to know how much warmer, so I am going to, well, I do have a thermometer. Once I set up the greenhouse, I'm going to put it in there just to keep an eye on the temperature. I also provide insulation to plants in there as well, and last year everything stayed so moist that I didn't have to water anything over winter. So hydrangea will go in my plastic greenhouse, and then all the ones that I can carry will go downstairs. Another issue in the future is that most of my hydrangeas are relatively small right now. I think some of them only get between 3 and 4 feet, although that seems like probably too large for me to carry downstairs. As these grow and mature, they might all have to stay up here, and I don't know how that's going to go, so we will see, but I am not worried about a problem that's in the future. I'm going to focus on just this winter. Next up are bulbs, and I'm going to do a few different things with bulbs. So I am going to plant bulbs in my elevated beds, which means they have to stay outside. Those containers are so large, I can't even move them an inch. So I'm going to tarp them. I'm going to provide some insulation around the outside of the beds. I'm only planting in my back beds because of that. So the front beds are not going to have any bulbs in them. If you are growing bulbs in warmer areas, this is why they recommend you putting them in the fridge for however many weeks are required of chilling requirements for the types that you're growing. But here, we can leave them outside because it gets cold enough. Now, anything that's in a smaller pot, I'm debating whether I'm just going to put it in the greenhouse or downstairs, because I know the greenhouse worked last year for the pots, so I might just do that so that I don't have too much that I'm crowding in the garage. It's also a lot easier to move a plant from here to here than from here to all the way downstairs. So still deciding what I'm going to do with the other bulbs that I'm just putting in the individual pots. Now, do know that there are differences between the types of bulbs. Some are hardy that require chilling hours, some are not hardy and do not want any chilling hours. So the ones that I'm growing, tulips, daffodils, hyacinth, is there anything that I'm missing? Crocuses, I'm growing some of those too. Those are hardy. Those need to have chill hours. Other ones like dahlias and caladiums, I don't think I'm growing anything else. I had an elephant ear last year. Those don't want to be cold, so they don't have chilling requirements. Now with more tender bulbs, there is still a difference in what minimum temperatures they can survive. My dahlias, I have overwintered in the garage the last 2 years, and again, that's like 40 to 45 degrees. Those have been fine. The caladiums, it was recommended 60 degrees, so those are inside in warmer areas. I think the elephant ear was also recommended like warmer indoor temperatures as well. What else are some of the other ones? Oh, here, some of the other more tender bulbs are like cannas, callas, ranunculus, gladiolus, and tuberose begonia. So if you have any of those, you might not want to put them in the same area where you're putting like a potted hydrangea. Again, dahlias I know can handle like the 40 to 50 degree temps, but check the minimum temperature that your bulbs can handle before just assuming that all of them are necessarily hardy bulbs. So that, I think, is everything about chilling requirements. Again, I had everything wrong about chilling requirements until really this year, maybe last year going into this year. I assumed it meant below freezing. It doesn't. So I can provide the plants I'm overwintering a bit more protection than I had previously assumed, which is good for them in containers, and just make sure that they stay a bit safer during the winter season so that I hopefully don't have to replace my plants that already look so pretty. So that's going to be everything. Let me know if you have any questions your methods for overwintering, especially if you are on a rooftop deck, and I will see you in the next video.